Hello and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, speaking to you from the Drexel University Picture Gallery. This is the first part of a two-part interview with the Honorable Rudolph Giuliani, former mayor of New York City. Mr. Giuliani served as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 1983 to 1989. He was elected mayor of New York City from 1994 to 2001. And in 2008, he was a contender for the Republican Party's presidential nomination. In this portion of the interview, we'll concentrate primarily on Mr. Giuliani's career as federal prosecutor and mayor of New York. Mayor Giuliani, Rudy, if I may.
Please.
Welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want to start by talking about your time as mayor of New York. And first to look back at four mayors that preceded you. Mm-hmm. John Lindsay, Abe Beame, Ed Koch, and David Dinkins.
Right.
And I actually lived in New York over the course of the Beame and the Koch administrations, and then visited frequently when you were mayor. Looking at those four mayors, and then thinking about yourself, tell us what it was that you added or you changed. What was distinguishing about your character, your leadership, that was different from those that came before?
I had a very different philosophy.
Okay, tell us.
Even though John Lindsay was a Republican, he changed and became a Democrat while he was mayor. The other three were Democrats. They did a lot of good things, a lot of things that weren't so good. But the reality is they had a very different philosophy than I had. And my philosophy was smaller government, lower taxes, stimulate an economy through the private sector rather than through government. And although Koch was somewhat of an exception to that, Koch was more similar to my approach. By and large, they kept New York City government large, they kept growing it, they kept it very big. For one reason or another, they didn't have much success in reducing crime. Crime over that period of time that you're describing grew excessively, dramatically. We went up to, at one point, toward the end of that, we were at 2,000 murders a year.
I remember that.
And we were never much lower than about 1,500 during the period of time of the mayors you're talking about. We would have 10 to 12,000 felonies a week. During my mayoralty, I reduced that by 60%. Murders got down to 500 to 600. Felonies were reduced by 60, 65%. I put a lot of emphasis on finally, significantly reducing crime. Some of them had crime reductions along the way, but none of them had a significant, massive reduction in crime.
So would you say that reduction in crime was your primary goal when you came into office?
I was elected for that reason.
Yeah.
I was a Republican being elected in New York is a big exception.
Right. Although Lindsay, as you said, was a Republican,
Lindsay
and
got
he
elected,
expanded.
Lindsay got elected as a Republican, but then left the Republican Party.
Right.
So I was the first Republican elected in 25 years, and I was the first one to remain a Republican in 50. So I was kind of an exception. And the reality is that I got elected because crime had gotten so bad, 2,000 murders a year, crime capital of America. About a year before I was elected, there was a front page of Time magazine called The Rotting of the Big Apple.
Yeah.
And there was a caricature of New York with people being mugged, people being beaten, people running out of town. We had very high unemployment, 10, 11%, even higher than you have right now. And
right.
we had big loss of jobs, and we had a budget deficit of about $2.5 billion. So the way I describe it is, I got elected because people thought the city can't do much worse. Right? So let's give them a chance. Let's give them a chance to put into effect a much more of an emphasis on reducing crime, much larger police department, and also put into effect economic theories that returned at least a significant portion of the economy to the private sector.
So you're saying that you felt that in a sense it was a desperate move.
Yeah, to elect a Republican in a city that's 5 or 6 to 1 Democrat, of course.
At that point,
sure.
People were miserable.
People were feeling tremendous anxiety about the future of the city. There was a poll taken right after I got elected and before I took office. Something like 65% of the people in New York City wanted to live somewhere else. So I saw it, I guess if I had an overall objective, my objective was to change that poll. I wanted 65% of the people to want to live in New York City rather than to want to leave New York City.
Was that during your tenure there was a shift then. People began coming back to the city. I suppose it started a bit earlier with Ed Koch, the return.
No, actually, right before I got into office, we had lost 450,000 jobs and people. So it actually started about a year or two after I got into office that we started to increase population. We went up something like, when I was elected, we were 7.3 population. When I left, we were 8.1 million. And the most important thing to me was that poll that I mentioned that was taken when I first got into office changed completely. Instead of 65% of the people wanting to leave New York City, 65 to 75% of the people believed it was a nice place to live and they wanted to remain there. But the city was a different city. Crime had gone down by 60 to 65%. Unemployment was cut in half. Jobs had increased by about 400,000. And the budget was under control. We didn't have major budget deficits like we had had in the past.
Right.
And taxes, important part of it, taxes were reduced by about $3 billion.
Well, it was a livable city again.
Right.
And one aspect that I recall very vividly were the quality of life issues. The squeegee men, they used to wipe your windshields. The cab hailers at the Port Authority that would go in and, you know, ask for money because they'd hailed you a cab. You managed to get rid of that. Now, I wonder how you did it. What did you do, and where did these people go?
Okay, I had two approaches to crime, two things, a philosophy and a program. The philosophy was called the broken windows theory. Some people call it zero tolerance. It isn't. You can't have zero tolerance. There's too many different kinds of crime to have zero tolerance. But the broken windows theory was a theory that was first propounded by two professors, Kelling and Wilson. And the idea was you have to work on small things if you want to affect big things. The idea is if you have a building and somebody breaks a window and you don't do anything about it, that's a small thing. But then they break another one and another one and another one, and finally the building falls down. And they believed that this was happening to American cities. And they felt that because there were so many major crimes and major problems in American cities were ignoring panhandling, homelessness that would lead to violence, street-level prostitution, street-level drug dealing. And all those things created a lawless atmosphere and made crime much worse. That if you were going to reduce crime systemically, you were going to have to concentrate on those small things. It was a total reversal in thinking about policing, which was to put the resources on the major crimes. And I had seen it work in smaller cities, and I believed in it, and put it into effect the day that I started as mayor. And the first group of people that we dealt with as part of that broken windows theory were the squeegee people you're talking about. And that was a very interesting thing because they had begun really very benign. I don't remember if they began 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, but they would stand around, they would wash your window, people would give them money. Started with kids doing it. It looked like a nice thing for them to do. As it developed, however, it became kind of lawless. All of a sudden, instead of kids doing it, grown men were doing it. And if you didn't have them wash your window, they would sometimes break your window, slash your tires, scratch up your car. Sometimes they'd actually steal from you. So when I first came into office, my police commissioner was Bill Bratton. I sat down with Bill and I said, how are we going to get rid of them? And he said, well, I'll come back with a plan. He came back and he said, the police department told me we can't do it because basically we have no right to arrest them. And this is where being a lawyer helped. I said, well, I've thought of a way to do it. Every single one of them that goes into the street is jaywalking. We have a law against jaywalking. So let's stop them and give them a ticket for jaywalking. And then in the process of that, let's find out if we can do it. He came back about a week later, he said, you know something, we can, and it's much easier than you think. We did a survey. It turns out everybody thinks there are thousands of these squeegee people. It's really only about 200 or 300. But they seem like 1,000 or 2,000. I've got more than enough cops to take care of it. I bet we get rid of this real quick. And he did. He had a great program, went out into the street, started ticketing them. Turned out that about half of them were wanted for other things, other crimes. Some of them violent crimes, some of them property crimes. And in a matter of weeks, we were able to significantly reduce them and get rid of them. It was a great thing because it was like a first victory the police had had in a long time against something that was a major problem. The public noticed it. It gave them more confidence in the police.
People were coming in from the suburbs, and that's particularly when
yes, they would come in from the suburbs. They'd come in from New Jersey. They'd come through the tunnels, and the squeegee operator would be right there waiting for you frightening.
So it was jaywalking? That was the
Jaywalking was the linchpin that we used, but what we found when we started identifying people was that a significant number of them were criminals, and some proportion of those violent criminals. And then we moved on from there to street-level drug dealing. We found areas of the city. We went from area to area to drive out the drug dealers. We started with northern Brooklyn, and here's the difference that we had over the past administrations. There had been some successful efforts, which I had participated in as U.S. attorney, to get drug dealers out of New York, Lower East Side, et cetera. But the mistake the city would make in the past was they drive the drug dealers out of the Lower East Side by putting a lot of cops there. Once the drug dealers were gone, they take the cops and put them back to where they were. And then the drug dealers would come back. What we figured out was we were going to just have to increase the number of police, and we were going to have to keep a portion of the police there. So we started with northern Brooklyn. We assigned 1,000 police to northern Brooklyn, whatever the number was. We got rid of the drug dealers. When we reassigned the police, we kept 500 behind to hold the territory that we had taken. And then we moved them to the Bronx. And then we moved another section of it, and we kept doing that. We kept taking areas back. It took about 2 to 2.5 years from the drug dealers, but then we would keep the complement of police about half of what the original task force was, instead of taking them out. I think we drove them out of the city.
Where did they go?
Well, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. I had a conference of mayors at Gracie Mansion a couple of years into being mayor, New York mayors, and they started complaining that I was sending my criminals
to other cities.
They started complaining that I was well, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I mean, I don't even know if I was doing it, but they were complaining that their crime was going up. But really, we were making it inhospitable to commit a crime in New York. Another part of it that people haven't focused on was the appointment of judges. The mayor of New York City appoints the criminal court judges. The criminal court judges are the people who set bail. I appointed over a period of 8 years, 100 of them. And I tried to appoint tougher judges. I tried to appoint judges that took more seriously protection of the public and at least balanced that against the rights of defendants. And so when we arrested people, we tended to have it stick more than was the case before. And then finally the CompStat program, which was probably the real thing that did it. The CompStat program was a computer-driven program. It originally started with little cards that I developed with Jack Maple and Bill Bratton of the police department. And what they did was they measured crime in every precinct of the city every day. We finally put it on computers, we put it on maps, and it allows you to assign your police strategically so that if in the northern part of Brooklyn you see an increase in auto theft, you can notice it right away, doesn't become a trend, and then you can assign 20 more police to specifically focus on auto theft. If you see rape growing in a certain part of the city, maybe that you have a serial rapist. You wouldn't even know about it earlier if you didn't have these statistics. You pick it up quicker, and you can send the police there. That program won the award from the Kennedy School of Government as the most innovative program in government in 1996. It has continued every day since I was mayor, from the first day until now. It operates under Mayor Bloomberg. Each year it gets more intense and better. And here's the interesting thing about it. Every year New York City has had a reduction of crime since we've had that program. And after we got to 50, 60%, people thought you couldn't reduce anymore. And it's a great program.
Reduced it further.
And it's much better now even than I left it.
Okay. I want to continue with this discussion of the police. You were beloved by the police department in New York. You were a great booster of the police. You were a great supporter of the police. They felt that previous mayors had not supported them. On the other hand, of course, you were criticized.
Of course, right.
There was controversy. There was this sense that sometimes you look the other way with police brutality, police misconduct. Do you think it is a very difficult balance for a mayor?
I don't. I thought that I was very balanced. I'll give you 3 different situations, and I